Hey guys, I'm so pleased to say that we've got David now with us. David, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you.
Welcome to the UK.
It's good to be here. It's been, I guess, a long time coming, so to speak, but we're glad to finally make it. I finally had the courage to get on that plane and hop over here, and it's been you know quite the experience thus far. But we've only been here a day, so I'm sure that we can get into a fair amount of trouble eventually.
Has this been an ambition of yours for a long time to play overseas?
To be honest with you, it's something that I never really thought was possible. A couple of years ago, people started to kind of mention the possibility of maybe coming over, and I'm a terrible flyer, and so I was obviously that would have been with the exception of maybe one or two other flights. It's the longest flight I'd ever been on, and it was just something that. Again, I think that probably subconsciously I was a little scared of, going to some place that I'd never been and not sure exactly who over there knew who we were or was familiar with the music. But for whatever reason, I guess they caught me on a good day, convinced me that it was smart to come over here, and we're excited about it, and hopefully it's something that we can continue to do.
You're playing at C2C this weekend, aren't you? Have you heard much about that over in the US?
A little bit. I've heard it's huge. I've heard there's a lot of people, and so that's exciting. It's funny. I was talking to somebody from where I grew up the other day, and I said I was going to Europe, and they just paused on the telephone for about 30 seconds, and I said, "Are you there?" And they were like, "There's country music in Europe," and I said, "Evidently, it's a big deal over there." So, really, the only time I'd ever heard of people coming over here was, obviously the huge superstars like Garth, back in the day, and obviously Taylor Swift had come over here before that I knew of. So it started to hear, the last couple of years, more and more people coming over here and trying to build things from the ground up. And like I said, hopefully it's something that we can do.
Well, the great thing about it is you'll be guaranteed a massive audience at C2C.
Yeah, so it can either have a massive audience boo me off the stage, or
I'm sure they won't.
Maybe at least if we can get a few hundred of them to cheer for us, I guess we'll call it a success.
So you're doing 3 shows across the weekend, I think, at C2C. So will you be playing with a full band, or will it be?
Yes. My guys are kind of slowly getting over here, I guess, one by one. But this is something that's been on the schedule, for a while, and it's definitely one of those things that you kind of have some anxiousness and some nerves and some excitement, and everybody's just it's kind of been the elephant in the room. Everybody wants to talk about it, but everybody's kind of a little nervous about it. So I know that they're all excited about getting over here and just kind of. Obviously, seeing the country and the city and what it's like, but because I believe it's every one of my group's first time coming over to London, so we're excited to see what all the hype's about.
And congratulations on the twins. That's
Yes.
great news.
Twins in December.
Yeah.
It has definitely changed my life for the better. I think obviously. For the last 36 years, I've been a pretty selfish individual and just having to worry about myself, and then getting married and having to worry about my wife, and now it's a whole nother experience. Just having two little people there that you can't really ever take your eyes off of, and you're constantly having to care for them, but it's been a lot of fun, and it was something that we worked a long time for, and wanted for a really long time, and we're happy that we're finally parents.
Is it difficult to leave them at home coming to the UK?
It is, it's just difficult. Obviously communication is a little difficult here, between here and back home with the time difference, and so, it's just like this morning I woke up and I told my buddy, I said, man, the first thing I want to do is call my wife, but it's 2 a.m. there, or 3 a.m. there, so. It's it's something that we knew eventually we were going to have to go back to work, and it was something that we're going to have to deal with. But it still is a little difficult to when you start. We were gone for 2 weeks a couple of weeks ago, and I was really paranoid that they would remember who I was, my voice or my face or anything, and you get home and you feel like they're just kind of starting to get to know you again, then you leave again. So it's something that hopefully when I'm home I can make an impact and be memorable.
For the benefit of our UK audiences who might not know too much about you, Tell us about your path into music and how it all started.
Well, I grew up. My father was a band director at a high school in my hometown, and so it was really, I was surrounded by music from a very, very early age. I tell people all the time, my father listened to everything. He was probably the biggest Beatles fan in the history of the world. Really huge on the British Invasion acts and Motown and just really listened to everything across the board. So I was exposed to everything, and it really wasn't until my teenage years that I realized that other kids weren't listening to that kind of music, and that there was current music, out on the radio, because we never listened to radio. We listened to cassette tapes that my dad had in his collection, and so I just was always around it. And I think, a lot of times, it's human nature to kind of fall into what, some things that your father likes or hobbies and such. And so I would think I was always kind of interested in it and intrigued, and just kind of started slowly, singing a little bit here and there, not really sure if that was something cool to do quite yet. And then playing guitar later in my teenage years, and starting to write songs, later in high school. And, it was probably 18 years old, 19 years old when I first thought, there was something that I could potentially do for a career. Moved to Nashville right out of high school. Growing up in a small town, was extremely overwhelmed, and moved back home, and then moved back a couple of years later and got a record deal, and the rest, I guess, is history from the standpoint of I've been in the business in one way, shape, or form for the last probably 15 years, but it's been a long road, a lot of ups and downs, but it's just something that I dreamt about, as a kid, and didn't really know if it was a legitimate possibility, but I think with a lot of destiny and a lot of hard work, it kind of worked out.
Right back at the start of your career, you recorded one of my favourite songs of all time, Finding My Way to You. That a lot of people might not know about. So can you tell us a little bit about why that album kind of never saw the light?
Well, it was a record that I made when I was 20 years old. I had absolutely no clue what in the world I was doing. Just singing songs that I liked and that people told me were good, and I really had no concept of artistry or, what was a David Nail song, what was a David Nail sound. I was just kind of winging it, so to speak, and wrote with a lot of, really great writers, and a few of them that I still write with today, but that was with a guy named Kelly Shriver, who was in a duo called Thrasher Shriver that I grew up listening to. So it was a dream come true to write with him, and we sat down and wrote that song. It was really, really a simple song. I think it probably took, maybe a day and a half max, and it was probably my favorite song on the record. But I think there's a couple of reasons I think that it never saw the light of day. I think, I was really young and made a lot of mistakes back then. And also the politics of a record label and regimes changing, and, maybe not being somebody else's cup of tea. So it's very ironic because, 6 years later I returned to the same record label, and I've been there ever since. So it's the only home I've ever known. But, I guess 21-year-old David Nail was not the smartest guy in the room.
But then I'm About to Come Alive was released, and Red Light suddenly became a hit. Do you think that was your career-changing moment?
Absolutely. It's I can remember, we were in, I think, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the Red Light, I think, was top 10, and it'd been on the chart for a long time, and a guy on radio there had told me, he said, if this song was 2 or 3 weeks younger, this is a number one song. And I just I can remember thinking, well, man, I hope it's, thank you, I hope it's a number one song. Anyway, I didn't realize that the fact that it had been on the chart so long would keep it from being a number one song. But I can remember when it first came out, somebody said, if this is a hit, you're going to sing this song for the rest of your life. And I can remember thinking, well, I don't have to do anything, but It's one of the first songs that we sing anytime we ever play anywhere. It's when we do the Grand Ole Opry, I always lead off the show with that, just because I feel like it kind of tells a story. It was our first hit, kind of put us on the map and allowed us to kind of continue on.
Fast forward to now, Nights on Fire is in the top 30 on Billboard. We were in California last year and they were playing it on the radio back then, and that was August. So your song seemed to stay around for a long time.
Yeah, people have had different, I guess reasons for that. I always say I don't care how long it takes to get where they get, just as long as they get as far as they can. It really feels like in the last probably month, it's kind of taken on a life of its own, and the research that's come back has been very, very, very positive. And I knew it from the very beginning when we first started playing it live. Probably almost probably this time last year, just kind of testing it out, and it was a lot like Whatever She's Got, from the reaction of the crowd, just kind of knowing that they didn't know the song, they'd never heard the song, but just kind of like acknowledging that, okay, there's something about this, there's a buzz about this, there's a vibe about this that just sounds like this has a lot of potential. And so we've really noticed, it was really neat this last couple of weeks to go out on the road and play shows after some time off, because obviously with more chart success, it's more notoriety, there's more fans of the song, more people that know the song, and you could really see the reaction grow, just from maybe being in the 40s and the 30s to now I think we're in the mid 20s. So it's and having done this a long time, it's another big jump to the teens, and then when you start talking about top 10, it's just a whole nother world.
You got a new album on the way, haven't you?
Yeah,
new record. A little bit about that.
New record called Fighter, that really was an album that just completely came out of nowhere. About this time again last year, I had written a couple of songs, Fighter, the title track being one, and another one called Home. And really just wanted to go into the studio and record those two songs and just kind of, see what would come of it. And the record label kind of caught wind of it, and we were coming off the heels of Kiss You Tonight, and everybody was just kind of like, well, do we release another song off the I'm a Fire record, or do we, come with something new? And I think that they kind of acknowledged that I was excited about this new music, and so they encouraged me to, seek more songs out, and really just being a competitive person. Once I got that blessing, it was just it was about a month of probably being sent 10 to 15 songs a day. I was writing every day, and we made the record in probably 2 or 3 months, which I had never done before. And so it really kind of became a game, so to speak, of okay, we've got these songs, we need this type of song, we don't have this type of song. You just kind of like putting pieces to a puzzle together, and literally took probably 20 songs in the studio, could have been happy recording any of the 20, and it really just kind of came down till we ran out of time.
So when can we expect that to be released?
I'm hoping sometime in the summertime. The whole having two babies kind of put everything on hold for a couple of months, and I was very thankful that we were able to kind of take a break and kind of experience that without any distractions. And so we just kind of started to talk about photo shoots and videos and things that you start to talk about when you're prepping for a record. So it's we're just kind of getting the juices flowing from that standpoint, but hopefully sometime in the summer.
Yeah, great stuff. So have a great time at the festival, David.
We plan on. We're going to have a good old time.
And thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you. Anytime.